So his recipe is 7 pounds of pale ale malt, 1 3/4 pounds of Vienna, 1.5 pounds of flaked corn, 8 ounces of sour malt, which I'm assuming is for pH adjustment on his water, and then 4 ounces of roasted barley. He's got half ounce of Northern Brewer at 60 minutes, quarter ounce of Northern Brewer at 30 minutes, and a quarter ounce at 15 minutes. I like the Northern Brewer edition in there too. I really like that hop.
Me too.
That's normally you're going to find that in your California Commons, but I think it's one that can stand up on its own really well. So I'm excited to try this. So looking at it here, let me run one into Tyler real quick.
Oh. Yeah, looking at this, let's see what the color looks like. You got a nice crimson there. I can see where your opinion may think it come out a little darker. Curious to see if it added any other characteristics with the roast. One of the things we were talking about is just looking over what we're going to do. I made a comment earlier of a lot of times cream ales can be a little too sweet and they're not as drinkable. And I think we talked about this on a prior episode. Adding some of this roasted barley will help give the perception of the dryness and help somewhat dry it out. In addition to the color, so
I think one of the issues too is a lot of cream ales are kind of bland. Now, personally, I find that more common in commercial cream ales than I do in homebrew. I actually think that this is a style that homebrewers do better than commercial breweries do. Just to my personal taste.
I agree with you, and that's what same thing. Most of the cream ales you're getting at small, a lot of times new commercial breweries, and they're sweet.
And I think a lot of times too they're kind of an ale version of your light American lager. When you talk about like Genesee and that kind of thing, it's just supposed to be a really light, refreshing, and it's a beer that I trash a lot, but in the right situation. I love it. We spent some time out in St. Augustine, Florida one time, and right across from the hotel was this restaurant that had like fried clams and shrimp and all that shit, and they had Genesee there for it was like $1.50 a bottle or something like that. And it was great, man, with some fried clams out on the beach, beautiful weather. It was wonderful. I drank a bunch of it.
Hey, every beer has its place. It doesn't matter what it is, especially when it's the only one you have. Then it doesn't matter what it is.
So this has fantastic head retention to it.
Beautiful.
It's kind of an off-white, real fluffy, moussey head, and it's just sitting right on top of there, which is, in these small pours in these glasses, usually even a beer with good head, it goes away pretty quickly.
It goes away fast.
Really nice head retention on it.
At first sign of well-made beer is a nice, pretty appearance that has this kind of head and just lasts a while. It's got a deep crimson.
It's a pretty deep amber crimson. It's a little bit on the cloudy side. Now, he used the K97 yeast, which is fermentous version of a German ale yeast. It might also be our pour.
Yeah, it's our pour.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's our pour.
But going back to the flavor, I think between the roasted barley and the Northern Brewer, I expect this to have a little more character than your average cream ale would have.
I'm picking up quite a bit in the aroma. Of that roasted barley. I think the roasted barley really is.
I agree.
Is a little bit high. If that's what you want, see, look how much clearer it is when the don't put up the sediment. So the roasted barley really comes out a lot. It's welcoming. I'm excited to see what this is because I do like that aroma. It doesn't come across bland. You get a little bit of the grainy notes of the base malt. But you get, that just nice welcoming touch of roast malt with really no heavy sweetness.
One of the things, too, when we talk about roasted barley, and this is something to really pay attention to if you're following recipes on the internet, or if you're brewing a recipe you brewed before and you didn't pay attention to what roasted barley you bought, is there's a pretty wide range of color in them. They range anywhere from about 350 up to 600 Lava Bond. And that's a big difference, especially when you're talking about a beer like this where you're adding just a little bit of it just for color. I mean, you could add 2 ounces of one and it would be the same as 4 ounces of another. So you do have to pay attention to that. I get the impression by looking at this that this was probably on the higher end because it's fairly dark for 4 ounces. I was
about to say the same thing after tasting it because the flavor is pulling quite a bit of that roasted barley. It does definitely dry it out, but the roasted barley is also giving it a added bitterness. So it's throwing the bitterness a little bit out of whack. So that's something, Mike, as you or Michael. I don't know which it is. Apologize if I called you Mike and you don't like it. But regardless, that roasted barley is adding some bitterness. So when you do this again, as you adjust your roasted barley, like you said you want to do, look at the number one. Look at the lava bond, see where it fits. You might want to adjust, making it lower, but also make sure that you adjust on your bitterness on your hops because it's adding bitterness to it as well.
See, now personally, I think I agree that it's adding some, and I think I like the level of bitterness that's in this. I actually, if I were him and I were lowering this, which I think he probably is going to, I might think about maybe upping it. Up in the hop bitterness, maybe just by 1/10 of an ounce or something like that.
It all depends on what you want. No doubt about it.
I do think that there is some perceived dryness from the roasted malt, which I like a lot. I think it makes it very easy to drink. So his original gravity was 1052, final gravity was 1012. I think right where you want to be for this beer.
So you know what that tells us is that roasted barley is absolutely giving you a good bit of that dryness because it drinks drier than 1012.
It does, yeah.
Which, like
it's
I said,
very drinkable.
There's no doubt about it. This makes you want to drink more. Very much like an Irish red should do. It hits you up front with a lot of flavor. This one's hitting you up front with a lot of the roasted flavor, but not like a stout roast. It's even less than a brown ale roast. It gives you a hint of that kiss of roast at the beginning, and then dries out so fast that it makes you want more. And so you could probably pound these pretty fast.
One of the things I will say is that roasted malt without any caramel or anything like that to back it up can sometimes get kind of a burnt, ashy kind of flavor to it, a la that crappy pale ale that I brought in. I tasted the non-infected version of it that Chris had, and it was not any good either. I mean, I totally ruined that recipe, and that was part of it, was there was nothing to prop up the roast malt that I put in there. And in this one, it does not. I mean, I think it's a really pleasant flavor in there.
I do too.
And that might be the Vienna that he added in there kind of helped with it too.
It could be. It definitely could be. The goal of what he was trying to do here, and it makes something very different. He's hitting it all the way.
Yes, I agree.
And it all depends on where you want to sit. Do you want to sit with it this roasty and this dark? Or do you prefer it to be just a touch lighter on the roast and it'll have a different drinkability? So now you're talking personal preference. We're not talking about any kind of style. It's just how do you like it, and what do you like on the characteristics of the beer, and does it make you want to keep drinking more? That's what it does to me. I drink this one and then very quickly want another sip of it.
Yeah, it's very drinkable. So we talk a lot on the show about recipe development and not changing too many things at a time. So we're talking about lowering the roast and changing the bitterness and all that. Personally, if this were me, this were my recipe, I'm looking at what he's talking about, what his goal is and where it came out, I would change two things here. I would half the roasted barley. I'd go with 2 ounces instead of 4.
Or look at the lava bond, like you said, one or the other.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, if it's a high lava bond in the 500 range or something, maybe go down to a 350, correct, something like that. But personally, I think in terms of just trying to make it predictable, I think I would use the same one and less than the amount, just because he already kind of has an idea.
I agree with
what this one does. The other thing I would do is maybe lower the mash temperature a couple degrees, rather than raise the hops up.
You're dead on right.
Yeah, and that way you end up with a little bit lower finishing gravity, and that will even out you'll keep the same bitterness balance that you've got, which I think is really nice. And
you'll run much less of a risk of a drastic change.
Right. Right.
Lowering it, there's a good chance that you won't get any much difference on the residualness of the straight sugars. But it'll let it kind of play together. So if that's the goal that you're intending to lower the roasted barley, I agree with you. First, number one, stick with the exact same roasted barley, and then lower it. If you take and knock it in half, or you even knock it down to 3 ounces, make that decision and try it. And if you're still and you think you need to go lower, then I wouldn't go much lower than 3 ounces, because you're going to completely lose your opportunity to have enough amber color to it. and at that point in time, look at changing the lava pond. So,
Yeah, yeah. So I will say I'm pretty impressed at the yeast that he used and the yeast character and performance that he got out of it too. That K97 is a difficult yeast to use.
Is it?
Yeah, we have found, and Kevin Lane from Fermentus told us that is their single fastest fermenting yeast that they make.
Okay.
And so when Stubby first tried to use it in typical homebrewer fashion, he thought, well, I don't have this quite down to the fermentation temperature that I want, but by the time this yeast kicks off, it'll be okay. And pitched it, and it was done. It tasted. Let me tell you, there are not very many times when I've walked in and tasted one of Stubby's beers and said, "Stubby, that's terrible." But I did with that one. I like this beer is no good at all. We couldn't figure out why. And then Kevin finally told us, like, you better be at your fermentation temperature when you pitch this, because it's going to take off and it's going to be done quick. So he fermented this at 59 degrees for 10 days. And I think the yeast character is great in it.
I'm loving it. It's super clean. It has a very, very light touch of fruitiness just to help it out, but it's so very light. I no, dead on with that. I wouldn't touch that by any means. Leave it at the 59 and go.
Hey, so we started off with surprise, some technical difficulties. We were not live streaming. Tyler's messaging me right now saying we are live streaming. So
wow.
Welcome to the show. If I'm not sure where it came in and what you missed, but we will be able to go back and watch this later on. It was recording the whole time. It was just the live stream that we were having a problem with, and I don't think it was anything on our end. There was not much we could do about it, but.
No, we're at the end of the first beer. It was a Crimson and Cream ale with just a little bit of roast.
That was a really great way to start off. That was a cool beer. I like that. And I've talked for a long time about cream ale. The one thing I do like about it is I think it's a good building block for fun ideas. So when he's wanting to brew something that's red for game day, but still real drinkable and easy to give to your friends and drink, I think he's hitting that dead on. I think just getting that roast flavor a little under control and the color a little bit lighter, and he'll have a home run.
I think this is a perfect beer for that, what you just said.
Yeah.
Given to your friends. It's a beer. It's a wonderful drinking beer. It's a beer you like to share. It's a safe beer that you're probably not going to give somebody and like, oh, it's dark, I don't want to drink this. Even though it is dark, it doesn't come across as heavily roasted. We're picking up a lot of that because this is what we know. But your standard swill drinker won't pick up as much of it.
They won't know what it is they're tasting, but I don't think they'll be turned off by it at all.
No, they wouldn't be turned off by it at all.
This is a good ambassador beer.
No doubt about it.
You'll make a convert or two with this one where they'll be coming to your house and saying, hey, see, what do you have over there,
I've known a lot of homebrewers that'll make cream ale specifically for that. That's their giveaway beer because it doesn't take a lot of ingredients.
Right.
It doesn't take a lot of hops. It can be relatively inexpensive to make, and that's what they'll do just as their giveaway beer. So, Michael, fantastic job. We're really excited for it.
Thank you very much for sending that in. We've got another beer of his that we're going to do on the next show. Let's see. See if I can find the email here real quick.
He also sent in a porter, I'm pretty sure.
No, it's a Belgian Golden Strong that we're going to do next time.
Wow. Yeah, yes, and I took a sneak peek of that one. So you've got my mouth watering. I've already looked at the recipe. I can't wait.
I always get excited about that beer.
I do too. And y'all have already heard us talk about it on a prior show. I think on two different shows. One of the original Come and Brew It shows, we talked about that style. So I will tell you, based on my personal opinions, I'm looking forward to it. So if you don't know what that means, you got to listen. We'll talk about it on the next show. So what's up next?
So let's do this Lemon Drop Blonde next. This is I want to save the Vienna Lager for the end, personally, just because I think we might spend a lot of time talking about that.
All right.
This is from our friend Andy Lim down in Houston. Andy's brought us beer a couple of times now, and this is a shop kit. This is the Lemon Drop Blonde that you can buy on the website. Like I say, I've had this several times before. We've had people around the shop brewing it and developing the recipe. I always like it. It's a nice, simple, straightforward recipe. I'm a big fan of lemon drop hops. I have found that not all people are. And so that's the criticism that I've heard of this kit when I've heard it is that they just don't like that particular hop. I couldn't disagree more. I think it's a great hop.
Well, I don't know this hop as much. We looked at it just a second ago. This to let everybody know this recipe is primarily all pale malt with a half pound of Crystal 20. Just give it a touch of sweetness, and then a basic bittering hop with all 2 ounces at late addition for your lemon drop to give it that lemon drop characteristics. I think I've only used this hop once, but I used it blended with a bunch of other hops. So I've never basically done an all lemon drop beer just to kind of exploit it. And one of these days, I'd like to do American Pale Ale with 100% lemon drop to see how it works for me. I've seen a few out there commercially, but I don't know that I've had enough of them to say I know what it is. So,
well, this will be a perfect example to get started with it. So I think you read off the grain bill, the hops. It's going to be bittered with Liberty, which before the show we were talking, I thought Liberty was a higher alpha hop. It's only 4.3%.
Okay.
So probably not typically a bittering hop, but you
can use any hop.
Right. Yeah. The way we design the kits here is that we want to have 1 even ounce as the bittering charge. So there was enough lemon drop in here that they probably just needed something low to start with. So after that, it's a ½ ounce of lemon drop at 10 minutes, ½ ounce at Whirlpool, and then 1 ounce dry hop for 3 days.
So base style blonde ale, just your typical all grain. Really no adjuncts to it, and a nice, clean, relatively straightforward yeast. Sometimes a little bit of fruit there.
So Andy gave us
looks nice.
Some very detailed notes here. He started with distilled water and RO water, and then added his salts to it. Basically, the additions that he did are going to be balanced towards hops. It's a higher sulfate ratio than chloride, so it's just going to accentuate the hops, which I think is a smart way to go with this beer. And then he used the hothead yeast, which this is his first time using it. I had been telling him, you are going to be blown away when you use this yeast. This is a favorite of mine now. He did a 1 liter starter with it, 24 hours ahead of time. And in this beer, which is, do we know the starting gravity on it? Let's see here.
Yeah, it should have been about 1048 at best.
So, let's see.
1045, 1048 based on 9
Yeah, 1051. Okay. It was his original gravity. So, hothead with the 1 liter starter on 1051, I bet it tore through this beer in about 2 or 3 days.
No doubt about it.
Just done. He mashed at 150 for 75 minutes. Interesting thing here, he mashed out, and it got all the way up to 180 on his mash out. Now this is a beer in a bag that he's doing too. So,
but at the mash out, that's very, very, very low risk at that point in time. There's still so much sugars you got next. I mean, we boil them for decoction, so no problems.
Well, and this is something we talk about with when we're talking about this myth that if you get up above 168, 170, that you're going to pull astringency out of the grain, which is much more a function of mash pH than it is
and it's really,
temperature.
It's really not that early in. It's when you start talking late and you're starting to pull most of those sugars out, and you're
really, over sparging,
and when you're in the sparging process.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at the mash out process, no worries. I wouldn't worry about it at all. I don't smell anything yet.
Well, and using RO water, his mash pH was probably pretty dead on. He doesn't have to worry about any funky pH starting with, so no worries there. And let's see.
I tell you, it looks pretty.
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about this hothead yeast is it drops out like a brick as soon as it's done. It did not have a whole lot of head retention to it, but that doesn't surprise me at all.
I mean, look, mine's still sitting there.
Well, yeah, I guess yours is. I've been drinking on mine. I drank my head away. Yeah.
These glasses are not the best. So just from a competition note, if you ever judge, and always take that into consideration.
Yes.
I mean, if it looks like what Brandon's looks like, and it still has that lace, it's still good retention.
Yeah. Do we have a camera here? I can hold this up. There we go.
Yeah,
so you can see there's still some sitting on the top there. If you would never want to mark that on the sheet as having no head.
No, that's fine.
If you pour a beer and it never forms a head at all, that's when you're talking about no head. In these little cups, in these type of situations, especially this is a big pour. You would never pour this much.
Well, I'm thirsty.
No, I'm glad you did.
Especially after I smelled this one. I tell you, that's the lemon drop hop. And you have just a hair of sweetness to support it. I get a lot of malt. I get just enough of the sweet bread, but it's light. It's supportive. It's not the showcase. The lemon drop hop is the showcase in the aroma, and like we already know, the hothead is very low on the ester profile, and so you get a little bit of light cherry note from the esters, but it's so very faint. It's all about the lemon drop.
You know, I hadn't picked up on the cherry, but you're right. There is a little bit of cherry in there, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. I got to say, too, Andy, these are fantastic brew day notes. I mean, he has marked the times and dates and the relative humidity in the air, all his water additions, everything he did. And it must have been a great brew day, too, because his target original gravity was 1051, and he hit 1051.
Okay.
His target final gravity was 1009, and he hit 1010. So, I mean, you can't stick the landing any better than that.
Oh, perfect.
Really well done. I think that the balance on the beer is really nice.
I do too, and this beer, the way you brewed it, definitely showcases that hop.
Yes.
And it showcases why it can be a polarizing hop.
Yes,
Because
I agree.
It gives it. It's weird. It's not tart, but the hop itself gives it so much lemon characteristics that it makes your brain think a touch of tartness that then balances everything else out.
It's actually got that kind of candy lemon flavor to it,
Yes.
like a lemon drop martini would
Yes,
have in it.
absolutely. Sweet lemon, right?
Yeah.
No, you took this kit and really showcased it very, very well. I don't know this kit. I didn't have a lot of opinions on it, but I tell you what, it's one now that I would consider brewing myself. Never ever thought about it, and opened up a new idea for me that I hadn't thought about. This really does a amazing job of blending all kinds of different flavors, taking a style, the blonde ale that's not normally this hoppy, and giving it a different twist is a lot of fun.
See, and when you say not normally this hoppy, blonde is not normally this hoppy, but it's not like it's a real hoppy beer. It's just got that crazy candy lemony flavor to it with a little bit of what you would think of as a traditional kind of I don't know, maybe a leafy sort of dank hop, just a tiny bit in the background.
No, 100%. But it starts at the beginning
Mm-hmm.
and continues as you get a little bit of malt, and the hop still stays there, and you get to the end, and the hop's there, and it dries out, and the hop's there, and the hop's there, and the hop's there, and it just goes all the way through. Even, I mean, I'm a couple of seconds after the last sip, and I still can taste.
You're right.
Taste
You're
that
right.
hop. And,
Yeah.
your process on this beer was spot on. Like you said, you hit the numbers that you wanted to hit, but you also were able to pull out every single characteristic of what this style is, or what this recipe is all built for. If somebody else could make one better than this one, I'd be surprised, because this one is absolutely perfect for this recipe.
A lot of times with these kits, it's a lot like cooking a really good steak.
Yes.
Like, you're starting with something really good, and all you can do is do your part right and get out of the way and let the steak shine. You know, what can you do not to ruin it? You know, the kit that has been, I happen to know that this one was brewed a lot was put into it to get it to come out right. Even though it's a simple recipe, it was brewed several times before we put it out, which we do with almost all of our kits.
Should.
And you know, you can tell that he did everything he did right and let the kit and let the hops and all that shine. This is the best version of this that I've had. And I've had several people brew it before. This is the best I've had it before.
Have you had it using hothead before?
No, I've not had it with... Oh, wait, no, I take that back. I think Chris Crowley did it with hothead, if I remember right.
I mean, if I were to take an English ale yeast on this, it would mess it up. If I were to take an American ale yeast and not ferment it very, very cold, it would mess it up. I think just the flexibility and what we know of the hothead, it does wonders. About the only other consideration that I might do would be a continental European ale yeast, but I would keep it so very low, just as well. But you might have had the perfect match by picking up that hothead yeast and putting it with this. It works very, very well with this base recipe.
Yeah. Excellent beer. Thank you very much, Andy.
We can't be done yet. I got to drink this.
I know.
This was something else. So a lot of fun. And Andy also sent us a second beer. He sent us a porter So
No, that's Matt Engelman who had the.
I'm all confused on it.
Yeah, well, that's all right. I'm hoarding all the notes here to myself. So
So yes, we have two of you that are we're sampling your beers this time, and we're going to sample them again on the next next episode that we do. So,
yeah. So we've got a local guy here, Matt Engelman, brought our next beer in, and he brought 2 beers in. We're going to do the Vienna Lager tonight, which I'm really excited about. And then next time we're going to have a porter with coffee and vanilla beans,
I didn't read all that. I just saw porter.
Yeah, it's coffee and vanilla beans. So I love that combination, particularly in a porter, and we'll talk about why when we do it. But thank you very much to everybody, because all of these beers, when I'm reading about them, I'm getting excited. You know, when I read, it's rare that I think cream ale and get excited. When I read what Michael was doing with that cream ale, I thought, I can't wait to taste this. Even though I had some preconceived ideas of what it was going to taste like, it's really cool to get in and find out how it went.
You know, that one, I had too. I had some preconceived notions. But a lot of what he truly did was very different than that. It brought out some other characteristics. It was a little bit different than what I originally thought it could be. And then, I think that's one of the really fun things about this show is we do get to see all of the behind the scenes, pull the curtain back, find out what's all about this person's recipe, thought process, what they really wanted to go into it, and not have to make any kind of assumptions, and then also throw away any kind of pure stylistic approach to it. That's been a lot of fun. Now we're going to flip over and we're going to take one that is supposed to be dead on the style.
A truly classic style, one that's very difficult to find commercial examples of.
It's very, very hard. You can't hardly find them. I mean, you're going to usually find the bigger version being the Martzen. This is a style that at first I didn't like. It took me a little while to come around on it. And it's also a style, this and the Martzen, that the malt took me a while to really come around and really understand and appreciate what Vienna malt is. And my opinion today versus what it was 7-8 years ago is drastically different, just from one, making them. This is one of those styles, if you don't necessarily know it or you don't necessarily like it that much, let's say the Oktoberfest, make it and give it a try and see what you think. So go ahead, tell us what our grain bill looks like.
So what we've got here is 9 pounds of, or I'm going to do this by percentage because he's got a printout here. And I'll say this from the start too, Matt, excellent brew day notes on here, really thorough notes that he sent us. So we're going to have all the information we need.
Pretty.
So about 44.5% of Vienna, 29.7% Pilsner, 24.7% light Munich, and then 1% dehusked Carafa 2, which I was a little surprised to see that one in there. But it's a very small amount. It's only 3.5 ounces out of a total grain bill of 20.2 pounds. So this must have been a 10-gallon batch that he did. 11-gallon batch they did. Yeah.
Well, he blended. He said he blended some of that Pilsner in with the Vienna. Some people make this style with 100% Vienna.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like that strong of Vienna, and that may be his thought on this is
and he's got light Munich in there too.
Yeah, he wanted to blend that a little bit, and so you're going to have to make a touch of a color adjustment if you're going to put some Pilsner and
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way.
And I always put a little bit of crystal in mine, so that touch dehusk is all it did. It was color profile.
Well, Carafa, I feel like years ago, Carafa gained this reputation as a malt that you could put in and it would add a lot of color and not a lot of flavor contribution. And I've always thought that was a real misnomer with it.
It is a misnomer.
I think it's got a very distinct flavor to it, and the flavor will definitely come through if you put it in. In this case, so if we were to break this down to a 5-gallon batch, it's less than 2 ounces in a 5-gallon batch. So that is an amount where you can use it where you're not going to really pick up much on the flavor. It is going to be a color thing. The dehusked is gonna help with that too. So it's a cool choice. It's one I didn't expect to see. I hadn't think about it. What you said, because there's Pilsner in there, you've got to add some color. That's a very good point. I didn't think about that.
No, just the crystal won't add enough. And
so then he's got 3/4 ounces of Magnum at 60 minutes for about 18 IBUs, and 2 ounces of Hallertau at 15 minutes for another 7 IBUs. Nice hop choices. I like those a lot. And let's see here. He's got his water additions. I don't see on here what water he's starting with, so I won't comment too much on the water because I don't know if he's using RO water or that with it. But
If he's adding water additions, I would assume so because it's such a soft water.
that's a really good point. Yeah.
And just starting to drink it, it doesn't give any of that heavy minerally notes. So,
but it is pretty heavily weighted to chlorides, which is going to be more of a malt accentuated addition, which I would expect that for this style.
Yep.
And then he's using the Omega Yeast Labs Bayern Lager OYL 114. I'm completely out of my element on that. I do not know lager yeasts well. So he said he did make a starter, of course, and fermented it at 50 degrees, so it should be nice and clean.
Well, I don't know that specific lager yeast. For you, I have been in my BJCB class, and last night we did BJCB class on yeast, and I've made this comment many a times in every class. I say it. I said, with lager yeast, find one you like, pick it, and stay with it, and then adjust everything else.
Every lager brewer I know who's a good lager brewer does that exact thing. They have one particular lager yeast that they really like. And I got to say, I bet 80% of them it's Bach yeast.
That's the one that's for me. And now, if you want to do a style that you need more sulfur, the Bach yeast doesn't put out as much. So you need to make sure that you adjust fermentation temperature. So I wish I knew this yeast more to talk more about it. I mean, we know that these Omegas have a lot of flexibility on the fermentation temperature. So
that's on the Kvike and the hothead strains and that kind of thing. This is a straight up lager yeast. Okay. So this probably is the same yeast as WLP has that's named something different, or the White Labs and then Y yeast and that kind of thing.
I was not aware that they even did that.
Yeah, no, they do straight up British ales and straight up lager yeasts as well. So, and the nice thing is you get more yeast in their pack for the same price. So, not that you don't have to make a starter. You're still, lagers need so much yeast. There's nothing you're going to buy and just pitch a pouch of yeast and be okay. But you're all starting with more. You're building it up more. You have a better chance of having plenty of yeast. I am looking here. There is some notes on the water profile. Not necessarily what he was starting with, but just that the target profile he was going for was light colored and malty.
Okay. So. Well, aroma-wise, it has a good toast note, which is what we expect. Not overly bready. It's straight up toast.
Really clean aroma. I really don't get any esters out of it.
It's clean. The hops aren't there. I mean, at 15 minutes, they've completely boiled and fermented it out, especially with that hop. It gives an intangible note without having you smell a bunch of the hops, but it really adds some of the complexity to the aroma. The aroma, like I said, it's all toasty, and it's not an extreme heavy toast. For me, I do all Vienna malt and then just a touch of crystal. For this one, cutting it back gives it a little softer toast. I like that aspect of it. It's toasty, but it's a soft toast.
So I'm trying to find his mash temperature on here because
and then flavor-wise, it follows that exactly. This one, you ought to be proud of this one as well. Hey, holy cow, we got some great brewers out there sending us.
We really do. Stuff, so. I feel like y'all are saving up your home runs to send into us here because
hey, I like that, and I don't want to. I'll tell you when it's bad. So.
And I'm sure it's on here, but I'm just having a hard time finding it what his mash temp was. But the original gravity was 1051, final gravity was 1012. The first thing that I think when I see Vienna Lager, and this is homebrew and it's also in commercial breweries, is going to be, is this under attenuated and sweet? Because I think that is by far the most common problem with Vienna Lagers. I think people just don't pitch enough yeast, and I think they mash too high. And the best examples that I've had that I really like are nice and dried out and very easily drinkable. They don't seem caramely and sweet.
Without being excessively dry and leave no residual sweetness and malt notes to it.
And I've never found that to be the case. So I've never had a Vienna Lager that I felt was like that. So.
Not specifically on a Vienna Lager, but that's where it can go. Is if you don't if you stop it way too far, then it'll go all the way out. You won't have that characteristic. In a Vienna lager, you need it to be clean, crisp, and you need it to have a good note of dryness. But you need to know there's still malt there after you're done drinking it. Now, this one, I do pick up some of that hop, just a very
little
touch
bit
in the flavor.
Yeah.
I didn't pick it up in the aroma. I pick it up in the flavor. It's a good hop. It definitely balances it out.
I don't mind the hop
No, I
flavor
don't
in there
mind
at
it at
all.
all.
I like it.
No, it works. And I think you're allowed to put a little bit, and it is a little bit.
You know what kills me? Whenever I see this a lot on homebrew forums and that kind of thing, people talking about Vienna lager, and there's always somebody that's got to pipe up and go, if you want a good example, there's one right under your nose. Samuel Adams Boston Lager is a Vienna lager. Just drink that. And I think that is a terrible example of a Vienna lager. It may be kind of the basis for the start of the recipe, but way, way too hoppy for a Vienna lager.
Yeah, no, and that's an amazing beer, but it's not a Vienna lager.
Right.
I mean, the closest thing that we can get is Niagara Modelo, and it's
Which I
not
love.
even perfect. If you live in the Virginia, Carolina region, Devil's Backbone has one that is just absolutely remarkable. I got a chance to go out there in March, and yeah, I brought a whole case back, stuck it everywhere that I could go. So, so it does say that floral spicy is low to none. So
Okay, well, I'd say this is low floral. Yeah,
and absolutely, without a doubt, fits in there. Some of the commercial ones go to none because they're trying to make an amber colored beer that's for the swill drinker. This one puts a lot of great marks in there. I think this is excellent beer.
I think he's got a really complex malt body in there too. When I saw the malt bill on it, I thought he's trying to go for some layering in the malt flavor, and I think that comes through.
It does come through.
He's targeting the water additions to accentuate that malt. He's letting the malt get out front without any yeast characteristics or too strong of a hop flavor. So the malt is really the star of this beer, and he got the attenuation right, and so the malt is there, but it's not overly sweet, and it's got some nice layers to it. I really like it a lot.
I do seem to pick up, and I don't know if it's the toast from the Vienna or if it's actually some of the carafas adding just ever so subtle roasted type note. Not necessarily roast, but more like elevated toast. So that the toast being, instead of a lighter toast, it's a darker colored toast. I get that a little bit, not necessarily overly distracting, but just I think that's kind of the difference for me of going from an excellent to an outstanding on this guy.
So
I love this. I keep drinking this. That's kind of where I sit on it a little
So assuming that the intention of this was to brew a really great, perfect two-style Vienna lager, what would you do differently to maybe knock the edge off of that a little bit?
I would, number one, either look at the type of Vienna that I have. Some of them are stronger than others.
Okay.
And if it's the Vienna, maybe even pulling a little more Vienna out and adding a little bit more pills, or possibly toss the carafa out completely. But there's so little of it in there.
You don't think maybe it's the Munich?
It could be. It could be. I don't normally like to put Munich. I think that's one of the misnomers of the style. If you ask somebody to describe a Oktoberfest, and this is the little sister to Oktoberfest, but if you ask them to describe it, you describe both of these two styles very similar. Many people start saying Rich Lloydens, and that is not an Oktoberfest. That's the number one thing that people make that mistake on Oktoberfest. It's all about the toasty and the bready notes, and that's the same with this style. It's about that toasty notes with being a nice, well balanced.
Well, I think that part of that has to do with a misunderstanding of exactly what a melanoidin flavor is.
Correct.
And how strong a melanoidin flavor is in reality. And if we had more Munich Dunkels around here for people to taste, they might have a little bit better understanding of that. When I think that they actually mean what you're saying is toasty and bready. And The melanoidin, I think, is just one of the lesser understood
No doubt about it.
flavors that are in there.
And
Yeah.
like I said, I'm having fun enjoying your beer, and
It's super drinkable.
I'm nitpicking the difference between, say, a 38, 40, 42, and the 45. We're looking at a spot to where there's a very good chance this could pull a gold medal in any competition that it hits. It's got a lot of those characteristics. It just depends on the judge and what they think of it.
I just love the way it just kind of disappears off your palate, too. It's really clean. Just comes and goes.
So, and that's what I was kind of hitting to earlier. It does that, but it doesn't make you forget about it. It's not so dry that
Right.
that toasted malt is not still sitting there. So it dries out and it goes away, but it gives you just this nice little reminder for a little while, instead of like the first one we had, that when it dried all the way out, it made you push to drink to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
This one, it dries out, but it gives you, say, hey, I'm still a malty beer. Still, come get me some more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm going to get a little bit more. Where's your glass there? You got to always have a little bit more of it. So I'm excited to bring this one to the table, and look forward to your next beer. So
Yeah, and also back to the commercial beer version of it. If you are an Arkansas listener or find yourself in Arkansas at all, in Little Rock, right near the convention center, there's a place called Stone's Throw Brewing that makes a fantastic Vienna lager. And that was another one of them that I went and like, okay, am I going to give this one a shot? And, or am I going to get a syrupy beer that I don't want to finish my pint, or is it going to be good? And, man, it was nice and clean and drinkable and delicious.
Good for them. Little Rock. I go through there every now and again.
Oh, you got to go to
Little
Stone's
Rock,
Throw, man. That was one of my favorite breweries I've been to. They had, I don't know, I think at the time they had 12 different beers on, and not a single one of them was an IPA. They had a triple that was really great, a wit beer that was really great, a Vienna lager, really cool selection of beers. And over the few days I was there, I think I had 8 or 9 of the 12 beers that they had, and I loved all of them.
I thought you said 8 or 9 of the Vienna lager.
No.
Which, hey, I normally am one of those people, just like most home brewers. When you go into a place, you bounce around, and it's rare that I'll grab one and stay with the exact same beer over and over. But if I found a Vienna lager that was as good as this one, there's a good chance I may stick on it for most of the night, and then hopefully go back another night and have something different. But
well, chances are if they're brewing a Vienna lager this good, they're doing everything else pretty good too.
No doubt about it.
This is not one that I find done right often. So.
No, this one, it's done right, and it's only done right by good brewers. You won't, unless it's a pure, perfect mistake.
That's not often the case with lagers.
No, it's not with lagers, and it's not with this style. And there's some other lagers that are a little more forgiving. This one is not forgiving at all.
Right.
It's more forgiving than your standard swill American light lager. But it's not. It gives you very little room for error. If you overdo or you any kind of coloring addition to where your roast actually comes out, it's going to happen. So you got to be careful that if you overdo your crystal malts and you pick the wrong crystal malt, if you're using crystal to color it, then it's going to stay sweet and it's not going to finish out the way you want it. So you got to be real careful, and then you have to have a really good, clean fermentation. Interested on this yeast. I hadn't used it before. You've done a good job. It makes me want to think about it. But the odds are, like I said, lager brewers, once they stick with one, they stay with one, unless there's one specific style that just needs a lot less sulfur or a lot more sulfur. Because that's really the biggest difference is the sulfur producer.
You just have to get used to how it performs. When it wants its diacetyl rest, how long to lager it, what your pitch rate needs to be, all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, good stuff. Thank you, everybody, for all your great response to this show. We are going to be doing another one of these in the next week or two here because we've got more beers for it, but please keep the beers coming. Please feel free to email me at brandontherep@gmail.com anytime with questions or ideas. I think everybody kind of realizes now when you send your beer in here, you're going to get a good, honest opinion of it, whether we have constructive criticism for it or whether we're just going to gush over it and tell you how wonderful it is like we tend to do sometimes. We're really enjoying having people send in their beers. Also, I believe it's Gabe Sassman, who's one of our listeners, who we're going to have one of his beers on an upcoming episode, sent us some beer from Michigan that we enjoyed before the show, Upper Hand, and then we've got another one in there. I can't remember the name of it, but we'll make sure we call it out again. Thank you very much for sending that to us. We always appreciate free beer. This Upper Hand IPA, I really enjoyed.
It was very enjoyable. My first sip of it gave me something strange, and maybe it's just because I hadn't had a beer before it. And then when I got to the second, third, it came around to where I really enjoyed that as well. So I do appreciate that treat. We're probably going to shut this show down and have another one, just so you know. And so tell those brewers thank you as well when you see them that we did enjoy their beer. So.
All right. You know what we need? We need a sign-off catchphrase. We don't have one.
No, I'm from South Louisiana, so I go, hey!